Okay, so today we're going to cover, I'm going to touch on a topic that's in the news a lot right now. Um, and One of it is the whole idea of foreclosures. And understand that when it comes to the news, our news has become, and no matter what network it is, have they become a little bit more clickbait. So you'll hear sensational headlines because that way they get people to tune in. I mean, there was a saying in the 80s for a while, if it bleeds, it leads. And what that meant was that in the 80s, had actually gone down in LA, but reporting had gone up because they discovered ratings went higher the more murders they reported. So what's always being reported isn't always indicative of what's really taking place. Um, So the one thing I want to talk on is a little bit of foreclosures and acceleration. Now, anybody who's in coaching, they get the monthly updated KCM report that I send out to everybody that has what's currently going on. A little bit in that, let me just cover that we are in a supply and demand situation where there's too little supply and there's a lot of demand. Back in 2008, when we had the crash, we had a lot of name it and claim it loans. We had a lot of what was called um, just interest only loans, where people, they weren't paying on the principal of the home. They weren't actually paying off the home. They were literally only paying the interest on the loan, and that was it. So let's say they bought a home for $900,000. 10 years from now, that same loan would still be $900,000. They were only paying the interest. That was it. They weren't paying anything down. There were also what was appreciation loans, where let's say you bought a home for $500,000, but they figured that in a year from now it was going to appreciate 20% because of the way the market was at the time. They gave you a loan for $600,000 with 20% above. So when all of a sudden people bought their home and they were already underwater, they were already owing more than the home actually was worth at that time. A lot of that kind of stuff that had taken place is not happening now. Those loans are not allowed to take place. People are vetted out. Any of you who have buyers or have talked about getting buyers, you know that everybody has to get pre-qualified. They have to document everything. It's no longer name it and claim it like it was back then, where you could state, oh, I make $80,000 a year, and they just write that down. Nope, you have to have proof, and you have to show funds and so forth. But part of what had happened back then is when we did have the crash, all of a sudden builders stopped building because there was no money to be made, and there was a mindset change. People were no longer building homes because so many homes had lost value and there was too many homes on the market that people could afford. And then at the same time, because builders stopped building homes and you had that whole decline, there was a whole generation of people that said, why am I going to buy something when it only loses value, and look at the disaster it had? So I'm just going to rent, or I'm going to figure out something else. So we've had a decade basically of no home building since that time. And because of that, we're very low on supply and we're very high on demand because people realize the investment that real estate is. Long-term, real estate has always appreciated 3 to 5% when you look over the past 100 years. And that's even with, you know, the crashes and all that kind of thing. In fact, one of the Keeping Current Matters slides that I sent out had shown that in the past 6 recessions, only one of them, and that's the one I was just mentioning, 2008, did real estate actually decline in value. All other 5, it always still increased because it's a solid investment. So you're hearing a lot of clickbait like, oh my gosh, things are decelerating in value and so on. And it's not decelerating in value. We've been looking at appreciation going about 11%. So think of it like this. Now it's decelerating. So now they're looking at this next year, overall national average is about 5.5%. So it's still appreciating, and it's still something that is a great investment. It's just not going to be the 11%, which that is kind of unsustainable. It's really, you can't really sustain that, but you're looking at a little bit less. So still, if somebody were to buy a home now for, let's say, $900,000, the projections are a year from now, it's going to appreciate still 5.5%, which is really good appreciation. There are going to be some caveats where you do have some people that are going to, for whatever reason, need to sell the home. The other thing in 2008, since so many people didn't have equity in the home, since they either pulled out all their money at the time, or they went into these homes they couldn't afford, or they were already upside down, people just walked away. And then you had what's called toxic properties, because then people walked away from the property, banks didn't want them, and so forth. We're also not in that situation right now. Again, a lot of the stats that I've sent out has shown that the majority of Americans have a good, at least 25% equity in their home, which means that a good decision, instead of letting your house get foreclosed on, if you can no longer afford it, is to sell it and to keep that equity. You're gonna actually still have some of that money left. So we may see some of that happening, where some people, as nationwide, some of the moratoriums are lifted, people start finding themselves in different situations. Some people who are still feeling the effects of COVID, where they lost their jobs, or they had to switch jobs, or for whatever reason, and they're no longer going to be in that house, we still may see some of those people making that switch. So all that being said, a foreclosure usually is a situation where you have it where a bank is saying, hey, you're behind on payments. They don't do that after the first month. Any of you might have a credit card or something out there, you miss one payment, you start getting reminder notices. When it comes to mortgage payments, banks a lot of times will wait like 2 to 3 months at least, because they don't want that property. It's a lot of hassle for a bank to actually deal with a property. They would much rather do their secure investment and you paying that loan. Now, at the same token, if somebody were to just could completely default and wait, and then months and months go by, they're going to start to foreclose on that, because that property, especially in this market, is a valuable piece of property. And it's something that they would go ahead and then sell and get their money out of it. But in those situations, you may end up with, that can be called a distressed home, because it's being foreclosed on. It's hard to get into the foreclosure market. And that's one where a lot of times you have to know different companies that do the foreclosures and that sort of thing. So I want you to know that I've actually looked into it personally myself, and it's a tough one to break into. And once you get into that, those people don't usually give up those positions, because it just works really well for them. You also have what's called distressed properties, and meaning that the property itself needs some tender loving care. In those situations, that's a whole different type of distress. That's where the property needs to be sold, or they want to sell it, and there needs a lot of work that needs to be done. Some of it could be cosmetic, where it's just painting and so forth. Others could be like there's foundation work that needs to be done. There's plumbing, there's electrical issues, there's a lot of outdated things, roofing, all of that. And all that stuff adds up. Like I can tell you, for instance, my contractor, who doesn't charge me full price for all the work he does on my house, he just quoted me $15,000 to replace my roof. And that's a discounted. So like when you're taking a buyer to go see a home, and you're looking at a new roof, you're looking at least $15,000 or more, depending on what you're having done. That's the reason why these properties are called distressed properties, because there's so much needs to be done. Who wants to really invest on those? When you're looking at those can be what's also called an investor play. You could put it on the market, and you have a lot of end buyers that will want to purchase it, because they're like, oh, we want a fixer upper because it's more affordable. And a lot of times too, people know how to do work themselves. Some people like working on their home. They have a brother who's a contractor. There could be a myriad of reasons why they want that. But they're also harder to find, because most realtors, including myself, I have investors. So if I can have an investor purchase the home, what do you think the advantage is to me to having an investor purchase a home rather than having an end buyer purchase it?
The investor usually will buy. Well, the process with the investor will usually be quicker than with the typical home buyer, right?
Okay, why would that be, Eric? Okay, I can give you some hints. No, that's okay. That's okay. Um,
Is it
It-
is it the absence of a loan for the investor?
Sometimes that the loan,
Okay.
that loan process is much easier. And
Okay.
because they just go by, you know, they know their lenders, it's a whole different sort of situation, and they're investing. A caveat to that, by the way, we've talked about that on the 9 a.m. call, is that a lot of investors, they will come in and be all cash. And, you know, they can show like, hey, this home is, we'll pay $900,000 for the home and we've got $3 million in the bank. So it's like, bingo, it's an all cash deal. And then right in the middle of the deal, they switch it to a loan. And they have to ask permission to do that, by the way. You know, it has to be something that the seller agrees to. If that's the case, if they can't just switch it. Well, I take that back. They can just switch it, because Peter Haven was on the call with us. They can just switch it. Usually, this is where I'm correcting myself. Usually they'll ask, is it okay if we switch it? If the seller says no, if they want to force it, that's a whole different issue. But many times that happens, well, because that way the investor is still hanging on to their money. So they can still go out and purchase another home, and they can purchase another home, because they're not planning to keep these homes long-term. They're planning on flipping them. And so the more and quicker they can do that, the more money they're going to make. It's a business decision. The reality is that even some of my sellers, where we've had that situation where they came in all cash and then they switched it to a loan, my sellers didn't care. You know, their question to me was, Rob, when we close a transaction, do I still get the full price of the home? Yep. Okay. I don't care. You know, as long as the closing is on the same time and they get the full amount for the home, they don't care. And my personal opinion is, yeah, why would they care? You know, they still are able to do it. Plus, it kind of makes the transaction easier to work with, because if you're kind of doing something for that party, then they're kind of a little bit more easier to work with. You know, let's say the seller's like, hey, you know what, we may need a couple extra days to store some of our things and then pick it up after closing. Is that okay? Well, you know, if you've worked with a buyer, a lot of times the buyer, especially investors, are like, yeah, that's no problem, because they've got to do a lot of planning and that sort of thing anyway. Another reason is that most investors are looking at really renovating the property. So they're not as concerned with inspections, because they're going to be tearing some of these walls down or tearing them down to the studs. My home, okay, I have a very typical home in the area. I have a 1,500 square foot home, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. My home is not a investment home. An investor would not come in and want to purchase a home, because I can charge full or nearly full price for my home. I've also put in some upgrades, like all my plumbing's been redone, both the sewage and all copper. I have a tankless hot water heater. As you guys know, I'm getting a new roof. I've had other upgrades done. We have a brand new HVAC system that's only 3 years old. So, and we put in a really good system. So all of that stuff, an investor looks at it and go, I'm not going to pay full price for that home. You know, I'm looking at making money on that home. So my home is an end user. But let's say I hadn't done any of those things and my plumbing is really in crappy condition. You know, the drains half the time don't work. My electrical really needs to be upgraded. There's holes in the roof. You know, all these other things can be taking place. That's when an investor would come in and make the play and say, hey, I'm going to buy that home because I'm going to do all that work anyway. I don't care if we do an inspection and let's say some of the faucets don't work correctly, all of that's going away. It's going to be a brand new bathroom anyway. You know, I don't care about some of these things because all of that's going away. So they're easier to work with because a lot of stuff they don't care about. The part that's a little bit more difficult is sometimes the seller's like, I want the most amount of money for my home. Well, you're not going to get it from an investor play. But it is a smoother, easier transaction. So that's when a lot of times I'll have the conversation with the sellers. What direction would you like to go? Because one's going to be much easier than the other, but you're not going to probably get as much money. The other one's going to be hassle, and understand, like a home that I just mentioned, if it needs all those things done after inspection, they may come back with requests for repairs, and it may be a lengthy, expensive list. And no, you can say no to those things. However, they also have the right to cancel, and then we have to start it all over again. So those are the decisions that you bring up to the seller in that transaction. An investor play also is easier because, Eric, let's say you're representing the seller and then you have an investor come in. a lot of times that's called double ending if you're representing both sides. Well, if you're doing that, you're not negotiating with somebody. There's no surprises that are coming up because it's all you. And I've had a couple of transactions that I've done like that. And that's the other guarantee is I can tell a lot of times my sellers, hey, I can guarantee it's going to be smooth because there's nobody else on the other side who's going to say, oh, by the way, there is no, oh, by the ways. I'm going to make sure everything's up front. That is, though, a time where you're going to be hit with an integrity crisis because it's hard to represent both sides and do justice if it's a normal buying situation. If it's an investor situation, it's much easier to do because there's really not going to be a lot of negotiations involved in that. You know, an investor knows what they're getting into and you're upfront about everything. So when I've done investor situations like that, I've told the investor, look, I'm representing the seller. I have no, you know, I can represent your side, but we're not doing repairs. You know, I understand you're an investor and so you'll probably come in at a lower price because of that, but it's going to be that price. And still we may consider other investors as well. And so that's a thing where it's a little bit of a tension, because if you have a regular end user and they're saying, oh, well, you know, like, let's say it's a buyer and they're wanting to buy the home for the family and they're like, yeah, but the roof needs to be repaired. Well, that's going to be a hard negotiation back and forth. And again, every situation is different, but understand that you may be caught in that. And the first time it happened where I had an investor play and I was representing both sides, that was a tough situation until I made everything very clear. Hey, you're buying this house as is. There's going to be no repairs. And in fact, that first one I did, the investor was like, okay, that's fine. I still want to do a termite report. That's okay. I just want to let you know we're not doing any termite repairs. Okay, no problem. Termite report came back of $2,700 that needed to be done. And something was mentioned. And I said, I did mention to you that we're not going to be doing any repairs. That's one reason why we went with your offer, because it was going to be smooth and quick. And he was like, okay, you're right. We won't do the repairs. So that's just something to be aware of when you're in a distressed property situation. The other thing is that usually a lot of investors have a lot of connections already. So they have things ready to go. Now, sometimes in those situations, usually the seller calls, and it's the seller's agent that usually specifies what vendors they want used, like title and escrow and so on. When you're working in with an investor, you may get thrown a curveball because they may have their own they want to work with. And they say, hey, nope, because I do this all the time. I want to work with these people. And that's a decision you have to make at the time. I've seen some investors, the way they make it appealing to the sellers is they pay for all the seller's fees. So they pay for all the escrow fees for both parties, and usually title, which is paid for by the seller, they'll pay title insurance as well. So because of that, they'll make that offer even a little bit more appealing. And then usually too, another term that they can offer is it takes the owner of a property to pull the permits. So the investor, if they're buying a property, they can't do really a lot as far as planning on it until they particularly own that property. Then they can start doing the planning, pulling permits and all that sort of thing. So a lot of times there's a little bit of a padding there. And so, as I mentioned, sometimes some sellers say, okay, we will move out, you know, by this time, or we can close on this time, but can we stay in the home an extra week? Can we stay in the home an extra 2 weeks? Can we, and that's when sometimes the lease back comes into play, you know, and so on, as I've talked in other calls. Or sometimes, well, can we leave, like we have a storage container in the driveway, can we leave that there for another week? Most investors, they don't care because they're not living on their property. Nobody's moving in, and it's dead time anyway because they're having to prep a lot of stuff. So they don't really care about that kind of thing. So sometimes you also get stuff that's of value, that's not money, but it may be of value to your sellers because of those extra perks that make it easier. So those are just some quick things about distressed properties. I also have a guide on that I'm going to be making public pretty soon. I've mentioned before, I have a bunch of guides and I'm slowly revamping them so that way it can be used in coaching. That's going to be one of the guides. Any questions on that so far? Okay. So kind of switching total gears, that's, you know, those situations are, if you have a client, whether it's a investor buyer, or whether it's a seller. By the way, if anybody needs an investor, a lot of us already have investors that we work with who've been in the business for a while. We've slowly made, you know, done relationships, and investors that you can really trust are very good at staying in their lane. So what I mean by that is, let's say, Eric, all of a sudden your Aunt Myrtle tells me or tells you that she needs to sell her home, but it needs a lot of work and she needs it to be done quickly and easily. Well, that's more of an investor play. If you were to contact me, I know of 3 people right off the top of my head that I can give you their contact info and they won't cross lines. So what I mean by that is they're loyal to me on all the transactions I work with, but then they would also be loyal to you on all your transactions. And I'm not worried that they're going to cross the line and kind of blur some things there. And so if anybody needs that kind of resource, we all have different investors, and sometimes it's demographics, sometimes it's different areas, and sometimes it's price points. There's one home that in particular I'm thinking of that it tends to be a very, it's in Hancock Park, and it may be an investor play. And that home, I have to ask my investors, hey, are you willing to go that high? Because normally they've been willing to do homes up to 1.5 million, but anything above that, they're like, oh, that's a little bit too much for us. So that's one where you have to kind of ask and see and go from there. But this time of year is also a time of year that's a great time to reach out to other people. And that's some of the things I wanted to talk about. The question I get asked all the time, and I resonate very well with it, because when I first started in this industry, I was always like, I don't want to talk to people because I feel like I'm bothering them. I don't want to talk to people because I don't know what to say. I don't want to talk to people, blah, blah, blah. And you have a bunch of different reasons. And all of those reasons seem valid. And let me explain some of those things. First, if you know these people, they don't mind talking to you about whatever. It's what you're talking about is the key thing. So for instance, a friend of mine that I went to high school with, I distinctly remember about 5 years ago, she got into this one special shampoo that that only, you know, it's like one of those things that you can only buy from her. And then, you know, she's a rep for it and blah, blah, blah. Everything about her was about the shampoo. And, you know, her social media post was, oh, look at my daughter's hair. Isn't it beautiful? We use this shampoo. Like, okay, great. Oh, and we use this hair product. Okay, great. And we use, okay, I'm sick of hair products. Okay, I don't need hair anymore. Well, the conversation all revolved around just her hair products. And so, yeah, I didn't want to, you know, it's like, I love Jeannie, but I don't want to really talk to her right now because it was kind of bothering. Now, had she called up and said, hey, Rob, I just wanted to touch base and see how's the family doing? What are you guys planning to do for the holidays? Oh, family's doing really well. We're actually planning to do blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, cool. You know, and how's business going for you right now? Oh, blah, blah. We start talking about that. I don't mind that. And all of a sudden you start talking about that, then a lot of times I'll start asking questions if I'm on the other end, and I may start asking questions. Well, how are things going on with your family? What are you guys doing? How's your business going? Oh, well, it's going pretty well. You know, a lot of my friends who've been using it, they've said like they can't believe the difference. In fact, some of my friends who, I am 55, so a lot of the women I went to high school with, they do dye their hair, and some of the men too. So, you know, let's say she was to say, oh, and a lot of the people who are in our class, they love it because even though they color their hair, it's still really soft. So I've just been, you know, talking with them and helping them out with that. Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. If I'm interested, I may continue that conversation. If I'm not interested, we may move on. But I now know, hey, if I know somebody who's saying, hey, I just got my hair colored and it feels like straw, maybe I should put them in contact with Jeannie because she has the hair product for them. So that's how a conversation goes better. Now, that sounds all great in theory. I actually have some things ready to go, so I could break it down and we can talk about how to word that kind of thing. So first is, it's called the Ford method. And the Ford method is family, occupation, recreation, and dreams, okay? And this is one of those where you can just ask an open-ended question, and open-ended means that the answer isn't good, yes, no, bad. You know, those kind of answers, those are closed-ended because it doesn't go anywhere. An open-ended question is more like, oh, how, what, when, where, why, all of those questions, those are open-ended questions. So for instance, if you were to call up, or if you were to door knock, because we've talked about door knocking, you know, you can incorporate some of these. Now, obviously with door knocking, if you don't know these people already, some may get too personal too quick. And then it's like, whoa, why are you asking me questions like this? Okay, so you kind of ease into it a little bit more. But the people that you already know, especially, well, how are things going with the family? You know, what have you guys been doing lately? This Christmas, now look, this is a great question. This Christmas, which family member do you look forward most to seeing? You know, that's a great question. That's an open-ended question. If somebody were to say, I haven't seen my grandmother in 2 years because of the lockdown. Oh, really? You know, where does she live? Tell me about her, you know, that kind of thing. You can do that. Those are the open-ended questions that allow you to start having more of a conversation with people. If you call up somebody and you ask them about their family, people don't get offended unless they're just asses. I'm going to say it. I'm being recorded. I don't care. But they don't, you know, it's like, okay, most people, they don't mind having a conversation. Yesterday, I actually got together with the agent when I first got in the business who mentored me, and we're still very good friends to this day. And we got together for coffee. We talked about his family. You know, we talked about what's going on with his family. He asked me what's going on with my family. It's just part of conversation. And we also talked about our work. You know, how are things going with him? In fact, he's the one who brought it up first. Hey, how are things going with you at KW Larchmont? Oh, you know, and we talked about that. But even some of those questions, you know, if you say good or whatever, that's fine. But some of these questions, like what kind of work gives you the greatest satisfaction? Now, do you have to say it exactly like that? And you're like, oh, that sounds a little weird. No, you don't have to say it exactly like that. You can say like, so this past year, what have you found the most fun thing you've done at work? You know, what have you found has been the greatest benefit? What has changed for you this past year the most for your work? Any of those kind of questions are open-ended questions, and they start talking about that. People love to talk about themselves, and this kind of gives you that structure on how you would go ahead and do that. You know, like, oh, so are you working full-time? Are you working part-time? Are you working from home? How has that been? You know, sort of thing. Then even, you know, like, Eric, you're a little young, so I wouldn't ask you the question of like, you know, what kind of work do you want to do before you're retired? But if somebody is more in like their late 40s and above, you may ask that question. You know, you may go ahead and ask something like that. Obviously, this isn't hard and fast. This just gives you some examples. Recreation. What are some things that, you know, you guys like to do when you have downtime? And you can ask that, and that's when you can combine family stuff, and you can combine family things as far as like daily, or you can combine the holidays, you can combine vacations, you know, all of those sort of things. So, you know, this is why it's a really good time to ask these of people, because this time of year, people love to talk about what they're planning to do for the holidays. So like, well, what do you like to do? You know, what does your family like to do during this time of year? What are some holiday traditions that you guys like to do? Do you guys go anywhere over the holidays? Or have you guys gone anywhere over the holidays before? Oh, what was that like? All of those kind of questions will open that up. You know, some of the things here, what do you enjoy doing when you have some extra time? So what do you like to do in your spare time? People, you know, have different hobbies they like to do for different things. And even if it seems like that could be closed. Oh, well, I like to watch movies. Oh, cool. What kind of movies do you like? Well, you know, I kind of like to be, you know, I like some of the fantasy and some of the action movies. Oh, so, you know, are you more into a Marvel person, or are you more a Star Wars person? Well, and that sounds closed-ended, but then when they give you an answer, oh, what did you really like about the last Marvel film? What did you think about the Black Widow film? What did you think about the Carnage film? You know, all of those kind of questions are open-ended questions, and people then can talk about it. You know, it allows them to just continue that conversation. Dreams are more that bigger thing of what, you know, what are your big picture things. So you don't obviously start off with dreams. So let's say you're door knocking and somebody answers the door and like, hi, I'm just, you know, going around the neighborhood. So what do you plan to do as your big dream for your family? Who the hell are you? You know, I mean, people are going to be like, what are you talking about? So the dreams are more for people like you may already know, or you established a conversation with, you know, even though it's the first time meeting, you got to know them. You know, you can ask those kind of questions. If you guys could live anywhere, where would you like to live? I get asked that question all the time, because Jamal and I, we tend to travel a lot, and we've been to just different places. So people ask us that, you know, well, what's your favorite place? Oh, and when people ask us, that's a whole conversation, because like, well, we really don't have a favorite place, but we have some favorite places, you know, and we start to explain why. So those are all part of like the dreams. What's on your bucket list? Again, you know, people that are maybe in their 20s, you may not want to ask them what's a bucket list, you know, because like, well, that's not quite kind of it. But you could change that to, you know, hey, so what do you plan to do by the time you're 30? What do you plan to do? What are some of your goals? What are some of your dreams? Have you written down any goals? I mean, and you got to get to know the person, because, you know, that's gonna change. If you were to go to my crazy Aunt Linda, who's passed, if you went to my crazy Aunt Linda's home and you were to ask what her goals were, she'd have no clue what she was talking about. You know, so it's like, no, that's something you kind of get to feel like, yeah, that's not going to really fit her well. Where if you went to my home, it'd fit me much better. I would answer that. But if you were to go to my crazy Aunt Linda's home, and trust me, walking up through the door, you realize she's crazy Aunt Linda, you would then kind of pick that up. So then you could say, oh, you know, I noticed, and then you could notice something about her home. You know, oh, I noticed that you have a lot of little kitty knickknacks in the windowsill. Or do you like cats? You know, yes, actually, oh, well, how many cats do you have? What are their names? She would have talked to you for hours about that, and hours and hours and hours, trust me. That's the kind of stuff that's an open-ended question. And so that gives you a lot of that conversation. These are the subjects to cover on. The questions that you would ask would be along the line of, it should show, does it show you open-ended questions in front of you? Okay, good. So what? So, you know, what do you like to do? What activities does your family, you know, like to engage in? What things do you like about your work? What things you wish you could change at your work? All of those are open-ended questions, and then people will talk and they'll share and they'll talk. What is some holiday traditions that you guys always have? Those could be, you know, some of the questions. Who do you like to get with during the holidays? Who's the family that gets together? And that invariably, you know, I'm trying to keep it all section, but that's so easily, oh, where do you get together? When do you guys do it? Do you guys celebrate, if you celebrate Christmas, do you guys celebrate Christmas Eve or Christmas Day? I know some families are different. Oh, you know, and you'll get different answers. When, you know, like if some people were talking about, they're planning on, you know, visiting the family. Oh, when do you plan to go? All of those sort of things tie into the open-ended questions. Where do you guys like to go on vacation? Where, if somebody were to talk, let's say they were talking about real estate, well, where would you like to move to? Where are some areas that you've looked? Where are some, you know, where are some places that you've always dreamed of visiting or actually living in? You know, all of those sort of things. How, when people, you know, like, you know, how do you guys celebrate the holidays? And I'm just having to do this all the top of my head. I have not pre-rehearsed this, but it's just, that's how the questions can, be a lot easier. Let's see, how, how do you like, and this is kind of like, one of those like things. How do you like this time of year? How are you able to, get everything done in time for the holidays? How do you plan to celebrate? And you can even ask this, how do you plan to celebrate New Year's Eve? And then the why questions, why do you like those things? Why do you like the Marvel movies? Why do you like living where you're at? Why is it that something that resonates with you? You can ask all of those different questions. And these are all the questions that people then start talking about themselves. If you've noticed, when I'm talking about door knocking or calling people on the phone, I haven't said you have to impress somebody with all your real estate skills and do all the talking. Because just like the shampoo, that's something people are not going to really want to hear. And that is kind of a turnoff. But you ask them questions about themselves, people like to talk about themselves. So these are the sort of techniques and the things that'll help you to accomplish that. These are the things that, like when we do script practice, the reason why we cover this stuff all the time, because one, it almost always applies. In any situation, you can always figure out what of the Ford questions will work: family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And you can apply any one of these, what, who, when, where, how, and why, to that situation at the same time. And that'll keep a conversation going. That'll let you get to know them better. And at the same time, you're going to start to know maybe more about this person. If they start talking about, it could lead into, oh, so what do you guys plan to do for the holidays? Oh, well, we normally go ahead and we go back to my mom's and we spend the holiday with her. Oh, well, where does she live? Well, she lives in Ohio. Oh, wow. How do you guys get there? Well, we actually drive most of the time. Oh, isn't it bad weather? What is that like for you guys? Well, and then you start talking about that, or no, we tend to fly out there. Oh, I know it's a really busy time of year. Has that been a hassle for you? And that sounds like a closed-ended question, but you could say, has that been a hassle for you? What has your experience been like? Then all of a sudden that opens it up. So all of those sort of things allows you to have that kind of conversation. If you're needing to expand your database, and we've talked about door knocking, these questions then you can use just to understand that you're getting to know a stranger. So you're wanting to make sure that you're able to ask questions that are appropriate, but make them also feel at ease. So I've mentioned before, I say this multiple times because it's a technique I use all the time. I have a red door. So whenever I see a home that has a colored door, red and yellow tend to be some of the hot ones, I'll let people know, oh my gosh, I love the fact that you have a red door. I have a red door and I love red doors on homes. Just makes it so warm and welcoming. Why is it that you guys decided to paint your door red? Why is it that you decided to paint your door yellow? What does a yellow door mean to you? I'm just kind of curious. That's the kind of stuff that allows that conversation to happen. It's somebody who you're just meeting and trying to get to know, but they can tell you those things. A lot of times you can tell things by people just by going up to their home. Sometimes some homes, they may have like a lot of fruit trees or that kind of thing in the front yard or somewhere around. You can ask them about that. Hey, I just wanted to say, first of all, I love the fact that you have fruit trees at your home. I just think that's great. By the way, I happen to be a realtor and I'm just getting to know the neighborhood. What is it that you really like about having fruit trees at your house? Because I don't see that a whole lot. Bingo. People start talking about, well, why do they have fruit trees at their house? What things do you really like about this neighborhood? What other neighborhoods do you really like in the area? And that's a little bit of a covering of a where and a what at the same time. But those are the kind of questions that as you're door knocking, you can go ahead and ask those things. You can, like I said, you can put them at ease. Sorry, delivery. So you can put them at ease by mentioning a few things like that. I usually do a technique where I introduce, like I say something, and then I introduce myself and say, oh, by the way, I'm a realtor. So I say that, so that way it kind of puts people at ease. I used to say, and I used to say, oh, by the way, I'm just a realtor in the area. By putting that just in there kind of discounts who you are. So if you just have that, that verbiage in your vocabulary, pull the just out, because then it makes it sound a little bit like it's discounted. Oh, it's just this. But I'll say like, oh, I'm a realtor in the area and I was going around the neighborhood and really getting to know the neighborhood. What things can I do for you guys? What things is something that you would like to see a realtor do for your neighborhood? What activities would you like to see a neighborhood do? Well, I don't know. What do you mean? Well, I know like a lot of realtors, they may have a dog portrait day, and they may just set up an area and have do dog portraits and have a backdrop and everything. Is that something that you think would be beneficial? I know some realtors, they set up a shredder day and people can just bring a lot of their stuff and shred it. And all of those kind of things could be, you start going from there. But by asking those questions, you're beginning to interact with people and then you get to know them more. I've said over and over again, whenever you do door knocking, have one of those like mini notebooks or something with you that you can take notes. And then not in front, like in front of them, you can take a few notes down, but then it looks like, hey, why are these people taking all these notes about me? So that usually doesn't come off always that great. What I tend to do is I'll leave, blah, 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 and I'll walk away. And immediately after I leave and I'm out of kind of eyesight, I'll start writing down things. And so then that way I can remember, oh, at 5432, this was the Casanova family. I'll put in there that they have 2 dogs. They have fruit trees in the front yard. They've lived there for 23 years. I jot all that stuff down. So then when I enter that stuff into my CRM, into my database, I have it all there, because there's no way I'm going to remember all of that information from every single home that I door knock on and get to know. I've sent out to a way to get to know people during this time is, some of the Popeyes, where you can have like the little thing where it shows like, hey, it's so sweet to have clients like you. And then you have the little candy canes that you can buy at Walgreens that are individually wrapped, or Dollar Tree or something. And just take those and like hand it to people. It's a cheap way of doing it. It's kind of cute. It's kind of fun. It allows you to then start asking these kind of questions. Hey, blah, blah, blah. I know it's kind of funny, blah, 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 whatever. Are you a big candy cane person during the holidays? Are you a big sweets person during the holidays? What are some of your favorite treats during the holidays? All of those are open-ended questions, and that all allows you to have a conversation with people. Okay, so I've been going on for like 15 minutes straight without anybody asking me questions. So your turn. Do you have any questions on this?
No, this is great, Rob. Thank you so much.
No questions, Rob. Do you have any questions, Eric?
Oh yeah, I have a question. Is the Ford format it's mainly used to getting to know the person more, but like what specific aspects can you use that for example, door knocking or something that's like more cold rather than from your contacts? Like what aspect of the Ford?
Well, that's one.
Or it just depends.
Yeah, if you were to door knock and do the family, yeah, you're not going to really dig into, like I mentioned before, you're not going to dig into this quite kind of as deeply, but so you're not going to ask how many people are in your family. That seems intrusive. But if you were to door knock and say, hey, I'm Eric and I'm a, and you compliment something on their home. I love the roses in your front yard. I think think roses are such a unique flower, and there's so many different varieties. So I just love when I come up to people's homes. By the way, I happen to be a realtor in the area, and I'm just getting to know the neighborhood even better. And I'm wanting to talk to people. So, what does your family think of the roses? Does everybody in your family? Now, I mean, I know I'm just focusing on roses. Or you could say, hey, I'm getting, especially around the holidays, I'm getting to know everyone and what they like to do. What does your family like to do around the holidays? Do people like to decorate? Now that sounds close-ended, yes, no, or whatever. But then if you can segue into it and open-ended, you could do that. Oh, does your family really like to decorate during the holidays? What things do they really like to do? What are some of their holiday traditions? You can start asking some of those questions. So, that's another one where a lot of people do decorate during this time of year, and that's an easy, oh my gosh, that's an easy one to hit, because then you go up to somebody's home that has decor on it, and you can just compliment them on their decor. Oh, I really love the Santa sleigh in the front yard. That is so cute. I think that's just really cute. Your family, it seems like, do they really like to decorate the holidays? What do they like to do for decorations? Bingo, you can start asking them those questions. So you're not being like super intrusive, like how many people are in your family? What are their names and blah, blah, blah. But you are asking, well, what does your family like to do for the holidays for decorating? They can go, well, we don't like to decorate a lot. And then either way, it makes it easy. Well, we don't really like to decorate a lot, or we love to decorate. Oh, well, what other things do you guys like to do during the holidays? Bingo. Now you're asking all these other questions and you're getting to know them more. And you may just stick on family. That may be the only thing you stick on. Just understand that when you're door knocking, maybe some of these other things might come up. Maybe I know some people that they've said, oh, well, this year we really haven't had time. Oh, yeah, I know a lot of people have been really busy with work this year. How has your work been this year? What has that been like for you? You see, you can just make that transition. And again, you're not asking, what do you do? What's your position? How much do you make? I mean, you're not asking those more intrusive questions. You're just asking more the general questions, that you're wanting to find interest in the other person is what you're wanting to do. And again, people like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about what they do. What do you like to talk about? And people like to talk about the things they like to do, the family traditions they like to have. Even if you were on the receiving end and people were asking you questions, then if they're asking you questions, you don't want to say, oh, well, I've got, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Here's their ages, blah, blah, blah. My mom is 83 years old. She lives in I'm giving them all stats. That's okay. Who cares? But if you were to come to my door and, you were like, oh, I really like, your holiday wreath up. I think it's just so warm and welcoming to a home. By the way, I'm Eric. I'm a realtor in the area. I'm getting to know the neighborhood a lot better. And I just also noticed there's a lot of decorations in the neighborhood. What kind of things does the neighborhood normally do during this time of year? Well, some decorate, some don't, it just kind of depends. Oh, well, are you guys planning to do any more decorations, or what are some of the traditions you like around the holidays? Well, sometimes we decorate more, sometimes we decorate less. It just depends. We tend to do this and this and this. Oh, well, where do you spend the holidays? Which holidays do you guys actually celebrate more? Well, Christmas Eve tends to be more at my house. Christmas dinner is going to be at my sister's house. Oh, that's really cool. Is your sister far or is she close? No, she just lives in Whittier. Oh, so she's not that far. No. That's the kind of conversation where I'm telling you stuff about what we like to do, where we like to go, how we like to spend the holidays together as a family. But I'm not giving you, well, my sister happens to be 62 years old. And, it's not those kind of questions, Does that help with that, Eric? Okay.
Yeah, it's just specifically it's weird because at my age, we usually never talk about any of things. So it's like a very gear change in my head to actually start talking about these subjects.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a little bit of a gear change too, because honestly, younger generation sometimes have a harder time with conversations because so much of what they do is electronic. So a one-on-one conversation is a little bit, it can be a challenge at times. And so, but there is a whole art to it that allows a conversation to carry. And when you're the one asking questions, you also tend to control the conversation more. Now, it doesn't mean that, oh, you're a control freak and that's what you're only wanting to do. I'm not making it sound like that. But it is that if you're asking the questions, you kind of know where things go. Also, one note there is don't think you have to know every single answer to every single question, at one time. What you want to do, if you could set an appointment, that's always one of the things we talk about in real estate. You want to set the appointment for a follow-up. And setting the appointment can easily be, hey, I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks. Would you mind if I stop by your place again and just touch base? I really enjoyed having a conversation with you. That would work. That's one thing I would love if I could just, touch base and talk to you a little bit more in a week or two. Not much time, just, stop by and just see how things are going for the holidays. That's where it allows you to have a follow-up appointment, because if you just meet somebody once, and let's say you talk to somebody once for 30 minutes and then you leave, okay, that's an impact. But if you were to come and you talk to them one time for 15 minutes, and then you come back a couple weeks later and talk a second time for 15 minutes, that actually enriches that relationship. Even though it's the same time, that enriches that relationship more because you've had a follow-up to that. Let's say you feel comfortable and you think that these people are going to be, like, oh, things have gone well and blah, blah, blah. Wait, would you mind if I come by and, let's say it's really gone well, then maybe you get together for coffee. Hey, would you mind getting together for coffee sometime? That's setting the appointment. That's a follow-up. And again, it doesn't mean if the entire conversation is about real estate, it's like my friend always talking about shampoo. After 2 sentences, I was done. So people like to talk about themselves. But in that, you find out also, even if they do have any real estate needs at the time, that then you can help address that, or you just deepen that relationship more. You're never going to talk anybody into buying or selling their home. Not going to happen. It's only when their need arises are you going to have that conversation. For instance, I had on last Wednesday, I had 3 people reach out to me, and I've known these people for quite a while now. And I've had these people reach out to me, and they all have different needs. One is looking at selling a family home and buying a family home. Another one just needs to purchase a home, and somebody else also just needs to purchase a home. Okay, great. Well, I've known these people for a while, and I could talk to them, constantly about real estate, but it's not until they had the need that they reached out to me. But I've deepened my relationship with these people that the first person they contacted was me. And that's how that works. So when you're door knocking, you're starting that relationship and you're beginning to deepen that. And it always helps too, when you set the appointment, if you bring something back that they may want. So let's say you were to say, hey, by the way, I'm going to get some really good cookies, and you could go to, I wouldn't say a store-bought bakery. I would say more, somebody that actually makes good cookies, if you don't make them yourself. And, would you mind if I bring you some cookies? Because I love doing that around the holidays. You may get to know people and you find out that there's different things that they like, and you can tune in on that. What if somebody really likes coffee? Okay, then like I happen to be a coffee person. So if they're like, hey, I know this really good coffee, or I can really, how about in a couple of weeks, I bring you this really good coffee and you let me know what you think of it. Sure, that'd be fine. You're bringing something, you're bringing something of value. You have a reason why you're following up. If somebody starts to talk more serious about real estate, then your follow-up value could be, hey, well, I even have a guide. It's no pressure, but I have a guide on how to sell, or what people that are selling, what they're thinking about. And it's also updated quarterly. So it's about everything that's currently going on in the market. Would you like me to bring that by? I can bring that by in a couple of weeks and just drop it off. Sure, that'd be fine. All of those sort of things are a reason to have a follow-up appointment. If you are door knocking, don't think it's going to be a one-time thing. That means you're going to be working the neighborhood and working the neighborhood and working the neighborhood. So, but if you can set up a time or set up in their mind that you're going to do a follow-up to it, then that really helps. And when you first start in real estate, a lot of times you have a little bit more of a flexible schedule. As you get busier, you may have things that come up that all of a sudden shift your schedule. So for me, like when I first started in real estate, I might have said, well, you know what? A week from this Tuesday, I'm going to be back in the area. So I can just bring something by then, how would that be? Sure, that'd be fine. But then I get, when I first started, I didn't have a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, I could plan on that Tuesday. That would happen. But now that I'm busier, if I were to say that and people were to say, oh, I thought you were going to be here Tuesday, then I missed an appointment. So that's when I would say something like, well, in about 2 weeks, I'm going to be around in the neighborhood again. And when I'm back in the neighborhood, is it okay if I stop by? Then I kind of leave it a little bit of gray. So if I have to shift or change my schedule, I didn't miss the time that I promised. Because people also remember if you said you were going to do something and you don't follow up with it. Any other questions? I wanted to really cover this today because today is November 30th. So we start in December tomorrow. And it's the holiday push. People are much more open this time of year of talking, and there's much more to talk about, and people are excited about it. But also respect the fact that a lot of people are really busy this time of year. So sometimes follow up is not going to be like you go door knocking this coming week, and then, oh, on the 21st, what if I stop by? If you were coming to my place, it'd be like, hell no, I am going to be way too busy getting ready for Christmas Eve. Sorry. But if you were to say, and you were to come by and blah, blah, blah. And you might say, hey, you know what? I'm going to drop off some coffee in a couple of weeks. And I know you may be too busy, but if I just drop it off on your doorstep, would that be okay? You may do something like that. Sure, fine. But at the same time, it's not going to hurt to send a follow-up appointment after, let's say, Christmas, after New Year's. Hey, would you mind? I'm going to be back in the area in a few weeks. Would you mind if I stop by? Now, people don't remember the weeks. So you could just say a few weeks. Sure, that'd be fine. Well, what if you come on December 28th? Really, a lot of times between Christmas Day and New Year's, it's a dead time. A lot of people, they have downtime. The holiday rush is over. That's a great time to follow up with the door knocking. Hey, how was your holidays? How was Christmas? If you've already met them and now you have that, you've begun that relationship, now you're following up to see how their holidays were. That's a great way to follow up. So I wanted to kind of bring this up because this is a time when you can really enrich your database. And I know for me, it's like go time where I'm going through my database and the people that I know and I want to really reach out to. I've told you guys that I make sometimes personalized frames for people. Some of my clients or the clients I really want, I drop off gifts. I have this year, I've kind of scaled it. My AA list clients, the clients who have done business with me or referred me business, I usually drop off a bottle of wine and something cute with that, which I plan to do again this year, probably a bottle of wine and some homemade cookies. But then I bought in bulk a bunch of really nice candles too. And I'm gonna do some labels. So clients that are maybe not my AA clients, but they're maybe my A-list clients, I'll take a holiday candle to them and drop it off for them. So it's not as much as a wine, but it's still something I'm able to drop off and just kind of, create that. And a lot of times when you do that, even if they're not home, there's a reason for people to follow up with you and say thank you. And then again, it allows you to have that rapport and that relationship. But sometimes you have to, if your database is still growing, you start the door knocking to start those relationships. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks for being here and following along with me. I'll probably send out these handouts too, just to kind of remind everybody what are some of the things with the forward and with the open-ended questions. Again, have a great day. Start thinking about what you can do to take advantage of this season to really help build your business and deepen relationships. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.